Hello and welcome to my most recent video. If you are new to my channel, I thank you for stopping by to see what I have to say about the Athlon Argos HD 20 to 60 by 85 millimeter spotting scope. We're going to get right into this thing and talk about the physical characteristics of the scope before I read you some of the boring details off of their website, Athlon's website. We have our rear lens cover. It stays on there reasonably well. I have had it fall off already on me. It snags and falls off there. It's not terribly secure, but it does do its job of protecting our rear lens when we're storing the scope. And that rear lens has a 4-position extending eyepiece. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have found that in my use, the little bit that I have had so far, I'm usually either at that most extended distance or just one click in. That seems to be the appropriate eye relief for my eyes. And that eyepiece has a bit of a rubberized texture. It's not like abrasive against your face, but it is pretty hard. It's pretty firm, I should say, pretty stiff. One thing I did notice about it the first time I used it was that the overall diameter is actually rather large in in diameter, and I'm going to be interested to see how well my camera mount does trying to get around this thing, because I don't know that it's going to fit. I may have to come up with some other means of attachment, but that is for me to worry about and not for you to worry about. Just one of those things that I noted when I first picked this up was just the overall size of this rear eyepiece. In front of that, we have our focus ring, which goes from 20 to 60, as the name implies. And it's got a good feel. It's got this rubberized grooves on here to give you something to grip onto. And I like the feel of it. It's nice and smooth. It's got a decent tension on it, but I'm not having it like try real hard to get it. It's tough to just whip, but if you just give it a good steady pressure, it rolls consistently. It has a nice stop at each end. You can hear it hitting that. And the same at the other end. There is a little bit of lateral play, like along the length of the eyepiece. You might be able to see that. It's not a lot, and it doesn't like feel like it's going to fall off. It's just interesting that there's a little bit of that play there. Might just be because I bought this used, and maybe it has been well used. I don't know. But overall, that section of the thing has given me no issues so far, and I'm happy with it. We get into the body here, and this is a composite body. It is not a metal body with a coating on it. It is a plastic body with a rubberized outer skin. It's not a really grippy rubberized body, but it is there to try to protect the scope and give it a little bit of impact resistance. I don't plan on trying to drop this thing to test it, but they do make an effort to at least, protect the overall scope a little bit with that armor coating. Here, at the middle of the scope, we have our focus ring, and it has the same kind of grooves as our magnification ring. It's also rubberized. It has a good texture. One thing I have noticed is that the travel from one end of the focus to the other end of the focus, I'm going to get to the one end and start there. So we're at one end. I don't know if that's the top or the bottom, but it has an absolute country mile of rotation. Like, I was surprised. Not there yet. Still going. There we go. That's the other end. I'll have to maybe mark it and make a note later and see how many full rotations it is, because I know that it's more than one, which maybe that's necessary to get you that extremely fine focus. It wasn't that way on the Vortex Crossfire, which has a similar design, even though it is obviously much smaller. I may have to bring that in at the closing just to give you guys a size comparison. Just don't have it with me right now. But that aside, the feel of the tension and the smoothness of it is good. Like, there is that whole range. It comes to a nice stop. It doesn't grind. It doesn't have any grit. It just is a lot. But it's consistent throughout. So that's a good thing. Directly in front of our focus dial, our focus ring, is this cant adjustment ring. So that if you need to, like say you're sitting down at a bench and you have this position next to you, you can roll this to any degree, any angle you want, and be able to look through it more easily from a sitting position that's not going to allow you to get up above it. Whereas like that, if you're a shorter person or if you have it on a tripod sitting on a bench, that's going to be, inconvenient. You're going to have to stand up to get to that. So they allow you this adjustment so that you can sit down next to it and still be able to look through it easily from a seated position. But anyway, that little dial just tightens down. I'm not going to try to see how hard I can crank on that, but that's probably just going to damage something internally if I do, and it's unnecessary. On the bottom side of that ring is our tripod mount, which has a stainless steel threaded insert, which is nice. This is just whatever their footprint is. It's not like a Arca Swiss footprint or anything like that. You're going to need an adapter if you want to put this on a tripod with an Arca or other standardized footprint. But it is a 1/4-20 industry standard thread, so you can put whatever mount you want on there. That's pretty common. Moving forward, we see the body still has more of this protective coating. Then it gets up here to our front objective, which has its own cover. It just kind of clips in there. It's got a little lip. It catches on the inside of the, not of the sunshade, but of the actual lens itself. It clips on the inside of there and just gives you some protection for your front objective lens. Get this out of the way, keep banging on it. But what we also have here is our sunshade. And that extends so that if you have low angle sun or some other source of light that's getting on your front lens, you can pull that forward and try to block that light a little bit to give you less glare on the front lens of the scope. And then we have on the very front our 85mm objective. It looks good. It's it's a lens. It gathers light. It does magnification as it's supposed to, and that's the overall body and build of the Argos HD spotting scope. I'm going to take my notes over here and give you guys a little bit of extra information, just stuff that I found online because I bought this without the manual. It did come with, excuse me, I forgot one thing. It does come with a bag. It fits on there pretty good. It's got a slot on the bottom, so if you wanted to mount it to a tripod while it's still in the bag, I don't care to do that because I find that all the straps and things just dangle all over the place and are annoying. But it does come with a nice carry case, fits it well, and will help you carry it around or protect it, like if you got it in the trunk of your car or something like that. It's just going to keep it from getting banged up as opposed to just having it laying there loose. So it's nice that it comes with that. I'm going to get that sit there so I can read you some information. Weight, we're at 70 ounces. What does that mean? For all of us that think in pounds, 4.5 pounds, 4.5, or 4 pounds, 5 ounces, so a little under 4.5 pounds. There we go. Magnification we've already stated is 20 to 60. The objective lens is 85mm. The length from front to back on this angled version is 16.9, so 17 inches. The width, which is basically the width of our front objective, is 4 inches. The height, which I measured because I couldn't find it online, is about 6 3/4 inches to from if you have it sitting parallel to the ground, from the tabletop to the top of the rear objective, is right at 6 3/4 inches. The exit pupil, which is important, is going to be between 4.2mm at the 20 power, which is actually fairly generous. That's normal rifle scope type exit pupils, to 1.4mm, which is absolutely tiny. That's going to be at your 60mm or 60 power at 80. That's going to be tight, and we're going to see how that works out. The eye relief is between basically 3/4 of an inch and 0.7 of an inch, so it doesn't vary a lot. But even in the little bit that I've used it, I've noticed that it makes a difference, especially at that high magnification. It's not just that the exit pupil gets small, it also seems to get pretty shallow in its range. So I'll have more to say about that after I get some more use. Let's see, field of view. 102 feet at 20 power at 1,000 yards and 48 feet at 60 power at 1,000 yards. So not a huge field of view. This is my first 20 to 60, so I can't really say if that's normal or not, but that seems kind of small. But it is a lot of magnification. For those of you who want an angular measurement of the field of view, it's 1.9 degrees and 0.9 degrees. The closest focus that it will do is 40 feet, which that's pretty close for something that's, you know, starting out at 20 power. And then the key features that Athlon touts for this is that it has HD glass, which they're saying helps with total image sharpness and reduction of chromatic aberration. But we're going to see that there is some chromatic aberration in this particular spotting scope. You know, anything that's got HD glass that I've ever used does have some. Fully multi-coated, what that does is reduce your internal reflection, so you're going to have less glare in your image from the light bouncing around inside the spotting scope. Argon purged, that is for reduction of internal fogging, which with this one, having used it inside, you know, at 70 degrees and then going outside to a humid 90 degrees, the outside lens is fogged up, but the inside lenses, I saw absolutely no fogging in the couple times that I've tested that, just going inside and outside from air conditioned to humid, hot summer days. And then I already mentioned it has a composite chassis. The only thing that I see on here that is metal is the magnification ring and where the mount is for the tripod. Everything else I assume is either glass or some kind of plastic. But I think I've given you guys enough details about this. You're probably more interested in seeing what we can see through it, so we will go out in the field and start looking at stuff, and I will see you there. Here we are at our final distance of 100 yards away from the eye chart, starting at 20 power, and we can obviously already see quite a bit of detail. The first, second, even third lines of letters, the first and second line of numbers, the details on the cards, the individual bullet holes, our entire color chart, the surprise chicken, everything looks good, chromatic aberration is low. Really a very nice image. Let's see how it holds together as we get up to 40 power magnification. Get our focus adjusted, and here at 40 power at 100 yards, looking really good. That third line of numbers is starting to come into view. The fourth line of letters is still maybe just a little bit too small to read. With the naked eye, you can actually make it out. It's a little bit sharper if you get the focus perfect with your naked eye than I'm getting on the camera today. But all in all, looking pretty darn good. I bring that brightness up just as the sun is starting to go down some more. So we crank this up to 60. We're going to need it because we're going to lose some of that light. And there we are at 60 power. We notice a little bit of the old purple distortion to the black. That is chromatic aberration. Not much we can do about it. We also notice that my square piece of cardboard has magically become unsquare. As you see, those corners starting to stretch to the extremes of our field of view, and it is no longer flat across the top, bottom, or sides. We have a little bit of pulling. That is just the fisheye that this scope is going to impart on basically any image that it looks at maximum magnification. That being said, our chicken, tremendously surprised. Our letters all visible, the numbers, all three lines visible, the handwritten notes on my target legible, the fine details in those playing cards just a little bit out of focus. I bet if we brought that over to the center of our field of view, or if you were looking at this through the naked eye, those are going to be nice and sharp. So at 100 yards, the full magnification range of this scope is usable. I will say that the eye box and the eye relief are extremely touchy because they are pretty small. But if you have a very stable tripod and you are, looking through it from a seated position or stable standing position, you will not have any trouble making out fine details like what we see on the eye chart there on the side of the car. But anyway, that is all the filming I plan on doing from this location today, and I will see you at the next location, if that makes any sense, because I filmed these out of order. But anyway, on to the next thing. Here we are, ever nearer to my vehicle, and we are looking at our eye chart at 300 yards, sitting at 20 power. Already able to make out quite a bit of detail on there, including that top line of letters. as well as our surprise chicken, but we are not going to be content with 20 power magnification. Let's go ahead and take it up to 40. Fix the focus, if I can remember which way to twist it. There we go. Everything's set nice and tight. And we are seeing quite a bit of detail. I think even bullet holes, if you had a decent little grouping of them, would be visible at that distance. The car currently is sitting somewhat in the shadows, so we're not getting quite as good of an illuminated view of it, but it's doing a pretty good job regardless. Went ahead and brought that brightness up just to compensate for the shadow of the ridgeline that's cast across the car at the moment. Get a little look at those vehicles and their dust as they go past. But we're now at 40, we're going to go all the way up to 60. Let this thing settle down, and we can make out the first and second line of letters, definitely the first line of numbers. If the wind wasn't blowing my camera around at the moment, we might even be able to make out that second line of numbers. But our playing cards are clearly playing cards, and our surprise chicken is looking terribly surprised. And our chromatic aberration, you can see it on that rebar post holding up that one white placard, and you can definitely see it along the edges of the white paper on the dark tint of the window. But overall, if you were using this just for spotting shots at 300 yards on paper, and certainly on steel targets, you would absolutely be able to make out splash. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and step into 100 yards, and that will be the final distance that we're going to look at that eye chart at. So I have us here at 500 yards. We're starting out right about 22 power, right about there. I'm filming these in the reverse order instead of 100, 300, 500. I'm starting at 500 because I'm walking back from my more distant filming location. So if what I say doesn't make sense because it seems out of order, that's because it is. But 20 power, that is my car, that is the eye chart sitting on the side, and I am going to go ahead and zoom in, and we will see what kind of detail we can pick out these extended distances. For me, the challenge is going to be getting the focus right. But there we are, 40 power. We can easily make out all the colors on the color chart, and we can make out both of the large yellow circles with their blue centers. The surprise chicken, I don't know, you'll have to look at it and see, because I only have a tiny little phone screen. I suspect you can make that out pretty well, but I'm not going to bet on it just because I can't see it on my screen here. But overall, you can make out quite a bit of detail. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and go up to 60 power. Alright, so now we're at 60 power, and we can make out the surprise chicken fairly clearly. Some of the playing cards, particularly the ace of spades, I think you might be able to guess that that was an ace of spades if you didn't know it ahead of time, and the top line of both the letters and the numbers are both fairly easy to make out. Certainly the top line of letters, the HGE. The numbers, again, you'll have to be the deciding factor on that, because you will be more than likely looking at it on a much larger screen. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and pick this up and move it into 300 yards and see what we can see there. Yeah. We're going to start our review of this Athlon spotting scope out here in the floodplain by looking at this first building, specifically this junction of wires where it comes into the building from the power pole, and it is at about 165 yards. I have the brightness turned down a little bit just because it was being washed out. Like if I go up here, you'll see it sort of whites it out, and I'd rather be able to make out some of those grout lines and whatnot in the masonry blocks. But also by bringing down that brightness, we're able to see the little just bit of chromatic aberration there at the junction between the shadowed side of the building and the lit side of the building.
But outside of that, the rest of the image is pretty free of chromatic aberration. Looks pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and zoom in so we can get a closer look at those wires. Right there I have us at 40 power. And I've brought that brightness back up just a little bit because even at halfway through the magnification range we are going to start losing some of our total brightness as the magnification increases. The other thing we see is that little blue-green line there at the shadow boundary on the two faces of the building has become more apparent. And if you look very closely, you can see that there's a bit of fisheye developing. If you look at that same line there, it's not quite as straight as it was at 20 power. It's just starting to show an ever so slight amount of bow. But in the middle of our image, everything's looking good. We can see those individual grout lines on the masonry blocks. We can see the different colors of wire, the brown, the yellow, the black, and the ones that have the white and gray banding. You're going to start noticing a little bit more of the purple fringe, the purple the purple discoloration in the areas that should be like a solid black or a dark gray. And that's going to just be chromatic aberration that we're going to see throughout. But other than that, sharpness wise, it's looking pretty good. And we're going to go ahead, scoot on up. Our max to magnification, I am going to fix the focus just a little bit. I think I have it about as good as I'm going to be able to get it. And that fisheye that we were seeing before is going to be a little bit more apparent. You're starting to see it on the very top line of the building up there on the gray roof against the sky behind it. There's just a little bit of curvature to that which should not be there, and in our shadowed and lighted side of the building we're also starting to see a little bit more curvature where it should be completely straight. But as far as the wire connections and the hardware, we're able to make out, pretty much all the detail you could want to make out in that jumble of wires. So overall I'd say it's a pretty good image. Before we start going out to longer distances, I am going to pan just a little bit to our left and look at the power transformers on the pole, because I think we're going to be able to see some useful things there and get an idea of how well this performs at closer distances. Let's go ahead and back this zoom out. See how much of that brightness comes back in as we get back down here to our minimum magnification. I'll bring that brightness back down. Bring us up just a little bit too, so that as we zoom in that will stay in the center of our field of view where we want it. And with the focus adjusted properly, we can make out pretty much all the detail on there that we would want to. All the little wires and the insulator elements are easy to make out. The wires in chromatic aberration, the purple tint to them is pretty much non-existent here at the bottom of the magnification range. So overall everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to 40 power. And I have played with the focus just a little bit to try to clean everything up. And here at 40 power we still have a very nice image. The individual elements of those insulators and the individual wires as they snake across our field of view are clear and sharp. We do see again more of that purple tint to the areas that should be black, like we saw on the side of the building previously. But aside from that, we are presented with a very nice image. Go ahead and move on up to 60 power. After taking a moment to adjust the focus, we see that we have a pretty well resolved image. If you look at that left transformer, you are able to make out how that fisheye is warping the image, because the two vertical sides of that transformer should be parallel to one another, and as you look down there towards the bottom, they clearly are not. One is starting to kind of pull out towards the edge of our field of view. And we also see an increase in that purple fringing in the black wires, where they are definitely having some color distortion from the chromatic aberration. But as before, the center of the image still looks pretty good, definitely usable. And like we saw on the target, at this distance, bullet holes and things like that, small things, would be easy to make out, as we can tell by the wood grain on that pole, where we can make out the individual bits of deterioration in color on that power pole. Now I'm going to go ahead and change our position and look at a building that is going to be at about 600 yards. Alright, I have us repositioned so that our field of view is going to have the building pretty well dead center, so as we zoom in we'll have a nice view of it. And at 20 power we're already able to make out things like the grout lines on the bricks, as well as the power pole on top of the building. You have to forgive me, I feel a constant need to fiddle with that focus. But what we do also notice, if you look on the left side of the building there's a highly reflective stainless steel pipe, and the sun shining off of that is creating a decent amount of color fringing on the left side of that. A little bit of purpley blue, you'll be able to see that. But other than that, everything's looking pretty good. The power transformer on the power pole over there are nice. You'll want to keep an eye on those. If they're still in view at 40 power, keep an eye out for that fisheye and see if that straight power pole starts to have a little bit of crookedness to it. Let's go ahead and zoom in. No, it looks like that power pole is going to be out of our field of view. But the building itself, even on that side, where the side of the building all the way down to the ground should be a straight line, we are seeing it start to pull a little bit at the bottom out towards like the 7, 8 o'clock direction. But we are able to make out, again, all the fine lines of the grout. We're starting to be able to easily make out the heads of the bolts. You can also make out all of the finer detail on the framework holding that particular building up. We can also see, if you look in the shadowed side of the building, the heat vent with little ducts that are flapped open, as well as things like the windows on the door and the difference between the frame of the door and the door itself. And then down on the stairs we can make out those individual steps on the staircase leading from the ground up to the building. So all that's looking pretty good, but we're going to go ahead and go up to 60 power now. With the focus once again adjusted, now we're able to make out that fisheye, and a more extreme example of it there on the left side of the building, because it is clearly bowed at this point, as are the handrails on the steps going down to the ground. They're just not quite as straight as they should be. The other things to take notice of are just, the amount of chromatic aberration we're seeing on that pipe, as I've already stated. But then also that the sharpness of the building has diminished just a noticeable amount from the 40 power magnification, and that's partially due to the distance and some of the haze in the air, but it's also just a limitation of this particular scope and its magnification. It just starts to struggle as we get up towards the top of the magnification range. But we'll go from here out to a building at about 1100 yards and see how that one looks. I have us repositioned to look at our 1100 yard building. I think I might have previously said 1000, but it is actually 1100. Just try to get this illumination right. And at this distance and at 20 power, everything's looking pretty good there across our field of view. Our depth of field at this distance is actually not bad. Those crops right there at the front, the green line where it meets the brown grass, is at about 240 yards. And from there out to our 1100 yard building, things are looking pretty good. I've adjusted the focus to favor the building just a little bit, and you can see how that leading edge of the crops has begun to blur. But I'm going to go ahead and take us up to 40 power. Got the focus adjusted, and if it weren't for the bit of mirage in the air today, we would be able to make out the grout lines of those bricks a little bit more easily, but with the wavering in the atmosphere, it is going to make it a little bit tough to make those out. And as we saw at our 600-yard building, the bright contrast areas like on the side of that pipe and on the sun-facing side of our transformer, we are seeing that purple fringe, which has been consistent throughout. But at this distance, we are still able to make out our power antenna on top of the building, as well as the individual handrails on our staircase. Let's go ahead and take it up to 60 and see how it looks at that magnification. So with the focus adjusted, we can see that the mirage in the air is a little bit more obvious as we see the finer elements of that building waver and move around a little bit, especially up there on that fine set of, power line above the building. If you watch that, it looks like it's just rippling as the mirage goes across it from right to left. The other obvious thing to notice is the fisheye curvature of that power pole on the left side of the field of view. It's not very subtle, and I think that's a good indication of the fisheye that I've been talking about. But if we look at the center of our field of view in our building, we are, again, just barely able to make out those grout lines. We'd be able to tell that it's made out of smaller bricks, but obviously they're obscured quite a bit by the mirage that is causing that wavering in our total image. But if you were using this to spot people or targets or game at that distance, obviously you would have no trouble identifying the species, male or female, that sort of stuff. All of that would be easily possible at 60 power at that 1100 yards. So then from here, I'm going to take us over to our last building, which is just to the left of where we're looking now. And so I'm going to try and get that set up nice and clear for us. I've gone ahead and backed us out a little bit to the 40 power. I'm not going to bother with the 20 power just because it's not going to give us much different of an image than we were seeing on the 1100 yard building. But I do want to back it out just a little bit to demonstrate how the difference between 40 and 60, we do see a drop in overall sharpness. Whereas right now, everything's looking pretty good. We can make out quite a bit of detail on those power poles. We can see the wires going across our field of view. The power antenna up there on top is looking pretty good. But I will go ahead and zoom us now into 60 power. And the things to keep an eye on are just, see about right there, right about that 50 mark. Still looks pretty darn good. And then just as we come into 60, I am going to adjust the focus just a little bit there to try to clean up that image as much as I can. But we see that we just don't have quite as sharp an image. The handrails going down to the ground are discernible, but they're just barely, more than a blob of gray. You can see that they are individual handrails there, but with the mirage in the air, it's just starting to kind of make them blend together a little bit. We also see quite a bit of that purple fringe coming off of our shiny steel pipe there on the left side of the building. And then just the overall sharpness of the edges of the building itself and the framework are starting to, lack from what they were at 40 power. If we take a moment and go up to our transformer pole, we can see the individual transformers, and we do see those insulators up there on top, though the finer detail of those insulators is no longer able to be discerned. Another thing that's tough to make out is the power lines traversing across our field of view. They are just barely, difference in contrast than the tree line behind it. And, if you weren't looking very carefully, you might miss those altogether. But on the whole, I think that for the purpose of observation, if you were looking for critters like deer or even coyotes or things of that size, you wouldn't struggle to be able to spot those unless they were, blending into the background color-wise, because we're not getting a huge amount of color separation. if you saw that with the naked eye, you would be able to see the differences, and it's all just kind of faded into a gray brown mass behind the building there. You can pick out a couple of tree trunks, but not a lot of detail to be had. And that is just going to be the limitation of the glass in this Athlon spotting scope. So what I will do is wrap this up here and take us out to another location where we're going to be able to look at some things that are in excess of, I want to say it was 2,000 yards. I'll have to check it when I get out there. I don't remember off the top of my head. I have us repositioned, and what we're going to be looking at here is the white water tank there in the middle, which is at about 2,300 yards. I also want to pay attention to the network of power poles and power lines that are just below it. They're a little bit tough to make out. We have 20 power, but you'll see them in more detail as we zoom in. Just know that the tan building, which is just below the white water tower and to the, moving to the left, is at 1,800 yards, and the water tower is at 2,300 yards. The larger water tank off to the right is going to be at about 2,150 yards. Just to give you some idea of the different distances. The American flag there is at approximately 1,400 yards. And we're currently sitting at 20 power. I'm going to go ahead and get us zoomed in to 40. So you see zoom, there's our focus right there on the flag, but then if I dial just a little bit more, all of that wire work and electrical equipment there behind it is now in a little bit sharper focus. I guess the American flag still looks pretty good at the same time. So as we get out there to that long distance, the depth of field improves a little bit, but the image also starts to look a lot more flat. Bring that brightness down just a little bit so that we can see some of that stuff going up the side of the water tower that would otherwise be washed out by the brighter illumination. There we go, just bring that down just a little bit so we can get some of that detail in the sunlight and kind of cut down a little bit of that chromatic aberration. If I put this where it looks like with the naked eye, it's actually about right there. And there's some of that chromatic aberration starting to creep in those high contrast areas. But the overall level of detail that we can make out back there in those electrical equipment is pretty darn good. If you look closely, you can actually see just the top of a window and a frame on a pickup truck that's sitting back there amongst all that other equipment. But our color representation remains actually really good. I haven't made much comment about that yet because everything we were looking at was sort of the same color. Had to pause there for a second and let the airplane fly over the top of us. But anyway, as I was saying, the color representation, looks really good. We have the blue, the white, and the red of the American flag, but we also have that bright neon orange wind vane up there just on the top of that roof, kind of in the middle of our water tower. And that is, what that color is supposed to look like. It's a nice bright orange color to alert anything like cranes or other equipment that might be flying in the area that which way the wind is blowing. Though I think in this case it would probably be for crane work. I don't think there's going to be any helicopters or airplanes flying that low next to that building. We're going to go ahead and get zoomed in to 60 power. There we go. Just had to keep fiddling with it. Alright, so that looks good. A lot better than it did just a moment ago. So anyway, let's talk about this. What we have, if you look especially up there at the top on the bright white areas of that water tower, and even on the shadowed side up above, like at the 11 o'clock on the water tower, there is just a noticeable amount of chromatic aberration against that dark gray, black, and green of the trees behind it. But in our electrical equipment there, all our wires and our little power poles, and even on that set of stairs on the building at 1,800 yards, it looks pretty good. I will say that setting up this for digicamming was and is always a little bit tricky. When you're trying to use it with the naked eye, it is also quite difficult because you have to have your eye placement at 60x magnification near perfect every single time, or you're just going to have a mess. At 60x, the exit pupil and the eye relief on this have to be exact. If they're not, you're going to be seeing shadows. You're going to see this, like, things are going to tremble. Your eye is going to struggle to focus on stuff because they're out of focus, because they're not, the different spectrum of the light are not lining up properly, and you're going to see a lot more chromatic aberration than you're seeing right now. So I don't want to be too harsh on this scope. I'm pretty sure that's common with all high magnification spotting scopes, but this one is particularly sensitive in my experience. But I think we have seen all that we need to see at the various locations and distances. Then we can make some definitive opinions about this spotting scope. So I'm going to go ahead and take us back to the bench and give you my final thoughts.
So we're back here at the bench to wrap this up. I know it's going to be a long one, probably close to an hour, so I will try to be brief with my final thoughts and just hit the key points. The first one of which is that I would probably not suggest this one to people for their first spotting scope. I don't think it's really going to be something that a beginner is going to enjoy using. And the main reason for that is at the maximum magnification and really anything above the 50 range, your eye relief and your eye box get very tight, and that's just a consequence of the magnification. It is what it is. But when I first started using it, and as I was trying to set it up to use the camera, it is kind of challenging to get that eye relief and that eye box right so that you're seeing a good image. A lot of the time when I'm setting up the camera, it's just a minor correction, left, right, in or out, to get image as clear as I possibly can and try to reduce the amount of fringing, just the overall sharpness, that sort of stuff. So, like I said, I wouldn't suggest it for a beginner just because I think they would struggle with it, and it would be frustrating. I mean, it was frustrating for me at times, especially on days when it was windy and I just couldn't get the thing to sit still and it was shaking all over the place, and then that makes dialing in the focus extremely difficult because the image just isn't going to be steady enough for you to tell if you have improved the focus or made it worse, and so you waste a bunch of time. Aside from that, the thing that I do like about it is down below, like the 40 power, between the 20 and 40, and it's kind of a pro and a con. The image at that range, when you're still like above 1.5 millimeters of exit pupil, down to the 20 where you have about a 3 millimeter exit pupil, it's actually pretty easy to get behind it, and it's pretty easy to have a nice image with relatively low chromatic aberration and fringing and things of that nature. So that's really where I think most people are going to use this, if they're just using it for spotting and not using it with their camera or with a mount of some kind to, attach a camera. But that also means that you're basically buying a 20 to 40 power spotting scope when you're thinking you're getting, something that's going to go all the way up to 60. It's just that top end of that range is tough to use. Speaking of attaching cameras to this, I actually ended up building a custom mount because I didn't want to have to buy a more expensive commercial mount that would actually allow me to connect my phone to this. And that was because the adapters that I already had wouldn't accommodate the large eyepiece. And so I made a mount that connects down here, and I also needed it because the type that I had previously, they're not sturdy enough. They were too shaky and were just giving me trouble. So I needed one that I could hard mount to this lower ring of the eyepiece and get the thing extremely steady so that I wouldn't get a lot of vibration and jiggling in the image when I was trying to capture video through it. So that's the other thing. If you're going to get this, you need to buy a good sturdy tripod. Trying to use it without the tripod is just going to be an exercise in futility. You have too much magnification, and any sort of vibration is going to have a detrimental effect on your image quality. So this is a good spotting scope. The image quality, as we saw, when it's dialed in properly, is more than acceptable, especially like inside of that 500 yard range. If you were using it for looking at animals or targets or just whatever, it really does do a good job inside of that 500-600 yard range. Totally fine. You start getting out to those longer distances and you're going to start having trouble, just because it requires a better kind of glass to gather that light at those distances and bring it to your eye in a sharp, clear image. That being said, I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with these 20-60 power scopes, so I'm not going to make a judgment on the value of it, whether that $200 to $250 is appropriate for this, because I don't have anything to directly compare it to. As I get more spotting scopes and I have some more range of prices and stuff that I've used, I may come back and do a comparison with this one to those and just sort of give my opinion at that time. But right now I don't want to say that $200 to $250 is a good price or a bad price, because I have nothing to compare to. I don't think it's fair to compare it to my Vortex, because it is a 12 to 36. It is a tiny spotting scope in comparison, and I think they serve two significantly different customers or users. So I'm not going to compare those two right now, because I don't think that's entirely fair to either one. That doesn't have near the magnification, but this one has its own issues, own characteristics, we'll say, that one doesn't have. So that being said, I wasn't thrilled with it, but I won't say that I was disappointed by it. It was just more challenging to use than I was expecting. But when done properly, it did render some pretty good imagery. So that's, I think, all I'm going to say about it is, I think based on the images that we got here in this video, you should be able to make an opinion on whether or not this is going to suit your needs. And ultimately, you have to decide what your money is worth and if you want to pick one up. But I will say thank you for watching, if you're still watching at this point, and I would always appreciate the likes and the subscriptions and any comments that you might have on this thing. I also enjoy responding back to the viewers and learning, how they have used this, or if they have had the similar experience to what I have. But aside from that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I will see you in the next one.